Carol Beaumont.
Very much, Mr Chair. I want to pick up where my colleague Andrew Little left off. I would like to think of another name for this bill because really, Immigration Amendment Bill doesn't really cut it, does it? It doesn't really describe what this bill is about. And so I'd like to suggest that we call this the Immigration National Shame Amendment Bill. And that's for three main reasons, Mr Chair. First and foremost, because the actual content of this bill, and this is where I'm picking up from my colleague Andrew Little, is shameful. It is shameful about the suggestion of how we might treat people who are already in the worst possible situations, people who risk their lives and their families' lives to try and escape terrible situations, and then to come to a country and be detained in the manner described in this bill. That is shameful, and it is shameful that our country's reputation is being dragged through the mud by this national government, a reputation that many of us and many of the people listening to Parliament are very proud of, a reputation that is well deserved because New Zealand has been a country that has treated people well and has played a role in all sorts of international forums. But it's shameful in that regard. But secondly, it's shameful in the sense that actually I don't think anybody across the House believes that this bill is necessary. It's shameful because we are wasting the time of this House putting through legislation that almost inevitably is not going to be used because we are not going to have mass arrivals in this country. We have not had any such situation arrive. Others have described this afternoon and this evening the reasons for that. And we are a long way from anywhere. We have a very hostile climate to reach this country by boat, and therefore the expectation is that we will not need to use this legislation. There won't be mass arrival groups for us to detain, thankfully. But nonetheless, it is still shameful. It is shameful that the government is using this bill, as others have said, to disguise some of the other things that they're doing as a distraction, to try and do the dog whistle politics, to try and actually appeal to the lowest common denominator, the sort of anti-foreigners, the anti kind of immigrant mentality that exists and that this government likes to manipulate. But also, it's shameful because this is legislation that has been prioritised over other legislation. It's shameful because there is really important legislation that this House should be dealing with. And I would, for argument's sake, that legislation trying to regulate loan sharks would be a very important legislation for this Parliament to be dealing with because it would actually make a real difference in people's lives. But despite promising that, prior to the last election, cynically in fact, in November of 2011, promising to do that, and then a whole suite of backbench National MPs talking about getting tough on loan sharks. At the end of April, we finally had a bill introduced to this House which is still awaiting first reading. Well, we could be profitably dealing with something like that, which we've already said we would support to Select Committee because it's a real issue, and it's an issue I've been talking to budgeting services about over the last 2 months. And thousands of New Zealand families are getting stung by high interest rates, high fees, getting into a spiral of debt. Well, sir, it's about the title of this bill, which is the Immigration National Shame Amendment Bill. And this is the third part of why this is national shame. It's not only offensive in content, it's not only a shame because it's unnecessary, it is a shame because we're doing this instead of doing things that we actually need to be doing that are worthwhile. So I think, sir, that it fits within the title Immigration National Shame Amendment Bill. And Mr Chair, I don't think that anybody in this House has presented any argument, and certainly those opposite have not, or the Minister, presented any really compelling reason for this legislation. I mean, not one call, exactly, as my colleague says. Apart from the Minister, we've just had National MPs sitting across the House taking closure motions, and this is a pattern. This is a pattern we see all too often. Why are members opposite not willing to actually stand up and debate it? If this is such an important issue, if it's so necessary, get up and say something about it. You have an opportunity. We're still on the title. Get up and explain to us why this is such an important bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The question be now put.
Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good choice indeed.